So Fleming, you of course produced Metallica's three classic thrash records, Ride the
Yeah,
Lightning, Master Puppets, and Justice. Of the three, is there a best one in your opinion?
it's like, picking between your babies, and it depends on my mood, I would say. I mean, it's hard, but I would say maybe Master of Puppets is ever so slightly number one, but tomorrow it could be Injustice. And
Hey,
then
fair
the day
enough.
after tomorrow it might be Rather Lightning.
Hey, fair enough. The following are the three interviews I've done with Metallica producer Flemming Rasmussen, where he discusses the making of Ride the Lightning, Master of Puppets, and Justice, and much more. How did you hear about Cliff Burton's death?
I got a phone call from my mother on the morning after he died, because she knew about Metallica and she got up earlier than me. We were going to see the gig at night. I was going to, they were going to play. They were on the way to Copenhagen to play. And yeah, they came from Stockholm and were on the way to Copenhagen. So I was going to see the show that night. And my mom called me and told that somebody from Metallica had died in a car crash. And I was like, who? And she wouldn't tell me. So I had to wait till the news broke, and this is pre-internet, so
Wow.
so it was pretty devastating. And I mean, no matter who it was a tragedy. It was not pleasant waiting to find out who'd been killed. It was devastating.
So, Cliff Burton died on September 27th, 1986. Within a few weeks, the band had already hired Jason Newsted as their new bassist. How'd you feel about that?
They were really quickly moving on, and I don't know whether they should have waited longer and grieved. I mean, I'm not a psychologist or anything, so. But in November, they were already getting ready to go on tour again. So I was like, okay, well, yeah. And still sad, though. I can still get sad today when I think about it.
So, when you were in the studio making Injustice, awkward's not the word I'm looking for, but there wasn't any sort of unsettling feeling about Cliff's not here?
It was not awkward. It was sad, but we'd gotten on. That was the way it was. I mean, we were doing a new album. We were doing a song to honor Cliff. To Live Is To Die is a tribute to Cliff. And that was the way we were coping with it. So there was nothing like I miss Cliff or anything like that. We were, getting the work done, which is what being in the studio is about a lot of the time, is getting the work done.
I hear you. Do you think, I mean, obviously this is a topic that's been discussed 1,000 times, but I'm just curious what your thoughts are on this. Do you think they intentionally lowered the bass for Jason as a coping mechanism for Cliff, or to haze Jason? Like, what was the logic there exactly?
I have no idea. I have to ask Lars about that. I think, but this is purely speculation, I think that they did it to get some kind of reaction from Jason, because what they hated the most about Jason was that he was a fan. And he was never like disagreeing or anything or stating his own opinion. I think they were waiting for him to kind of state his place in the band, like, this is me, and say no to shit, And I think they probably did it to get a reaction, and when it didn't come, that was the way the album turned out.
Interesting.
And he more or less, took it, because he was so happy he was in Metallica, because it was his favorite band. But this is just me speculating. I have nothing that can kind of support that thing. That's just speculation. It could be that it's because they were sad about Cliff. I don't know. You're going to have to ask the band that. But it's a fact that it was Lars and James that turned the bass down.
You've never just spoken to them just casually, like asking like why they did that?
No. I mean, in my opinion, once you released an album, that's it. I see albums and music as statements in time. So once it's released, that's it. That was how it was at the specific time it was released. And, remixing Injustice for All and turning up the bass is, tried it all the time. It would still not be the original, right? It would be kind of a copy, something that wasn't the original album.
Did it surprise you when Jason left the band?
Yes and no. I never really thought about it. I just thought he must have had his reasons. I didn't look into it that much since I was not working with them. And I was not the closest to Jason, even though we did an album together. My history with the other guys go further back. So it was, I really liked Jason. I thought he was a super great bass player. And if he had kind of stated his, stood his ground in the beginning and kind of said, no, shut up, I don't want to do that. And, made his mark in the band, which he did later on, but they still called him New Kid after 12 years, right? Yeah. Then he probably would still be bass player in Metallica. But, I have no reason to know what the hell was going on. I mean, you can see as much as you want in the Some Kind of Monster movie, and because they're also kind of, what, he left? They were like, what? I mean, but there is tension. There is obviously tension. So I was surprised and not surprised. I was like, shit.
Did you ever talk to Jason after he left the band?
No, I was supposed to meet him, but then something came up. We're still friends, there's no bad feelings there.
That's good. So, as discussed, there was tension within Metallica prior to Jason's departure. At the beginning, however, in 1986, when he joined the band, and even later on in 88 when you were making Injustice, was there tension at that point between Jason and the band?
No, not at all. That tension that kind of displays in Some Kind of Monster is something that comes after the Black Album. I'm guessing, hitting the top, that, they were probably the number one band in the world. That and trying to maintain that position, that's when the going gets tough. You got to remember, all the albums I did was we improved. So it was like going up, and that life is easy then. Once you're at the top and have to stay there, that's when it starts getting difficult. I mean, when they did Ride the Lightning, they were short on money. They were touring Europe to get money to pay for the studio. They didn't sleep at hotels at all during Ride the Lightning because they couldn't afford that. But they slept at a lot of their friends' apartments. Ken Anthony's place, which is an old friend of Lars. And at one point, they were actually sleeping in the studio, yeah. And we had we had facilities so they could shower and shit. We had the whole second floor was not converted into the B studio yet, so they basically slept in what was to be Sweet Silence Studio B, a few years after that.
Even Lars, he's a native of Denmark, he would sleep in the studio at times too?
I'm guessing he would could always crash at his parents'. So I'm guessing he probably slept at home. He might have if it was late, because, we worked night shifts, because the studio was booked from 10 in the morning till 6 in the evening. Then we had a 1 hour crossover from 6 till 7. And at 7, Metallica would start recording. So we would start at 7 at night in February in a very cold winter. And Lars's drums was placed in an unheated back room. So we had to, the first thing I had to do when I came was turn on some outdoor gas heaters that would kind of heat the room up.
So last time we spoke, you mentioned that you and the band would often play poker during the making of Ride the Lightning and Master of Puppets. Is there any particular reason why?
It was just relaxing after work, getting a beer and something, and I kind of wondered why they were doing that, and it was especially on Master of Puppets because we were working nights again, and I figured out that if we ended at 4:30, then we'd have a beer and we'd start playing poker, And they would always go back, because they were staying at a hotel. They would always go back to the hotel 5:45. And then I found out that's because the morning buffet opened at 6. So they would pig out on that.
That's awesome.
So the reason why we were doing that was, to kill some time before they could go back to the hotel and eat breakfast, which was basically their nightcap before going to bed. They would then, pig out on the breakfast buffet, go to bed, get up in the afternoon, shower, and then come to my place at home. And my wife would have made dinner to them, because they ate at my house before we started recording.
So I guess you guys, this probably would have been on Ride the Lightning. Like, at what point did you go from being purely the producer to being, like a family friend of theirs? Was that during Ride the Lightning?
That's got to be sometime during Ride the Lightning, because they were really interested in learning about recording, and I was telling them a lot of how, every time they would ask and I would answer, and they would learn about recording because they were really interested in that, because they wanted their albums to sound like really, really good. So I was telling them, why are you doing that? And I'll tell that's because blah, 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 and all this shit. So yeah, I mean, sometime during Ride the Lightning, they started calling me Daddy, which was kind of strange. Because I'm only 3-4 years older than them. But when you're 20 and I was 25, 26, whatever, they were 20 something, the gap is percentage wise bigger. So yeah, at one point they started calling me Dad.
Do they still call you that now?
No, not anymore. No.
In one of our interviews, you mentioned it briefly, but I wanted to know if you could elaborate on it. You mentioned that when Cliff would record bass, he wouldn't use headphones. What was that experience like working with him without headphones?
It was actually really good. It was also pretty funny because, he would never stand still because he was like a very active person also on stage. And you would just sometimes just see his hair jumping up and down in the studio through the control room windows. But it was good. I hooked up a pair of big speakers and blasted the track there, and he could play to that. And he would actually also hear the bass that he played on those speakers. And it's a lot of people do that if you're not comfortable with headphones, but it was a test, and I'm guessing we ended up using headphones, but we definitely did it on some of the tracks. I don't know if we did it on all, but it was definitely something we tried out. He was uncomfortable playing headphones. He did a couple of takes. It sounded bad. I said to him, let's try and do it to speakers, and he did it in the first take.
So now, in terms of James Hetfield, it's well known he didn't like to sing originally. When did he start to like it?
Probably on the Black Album. He didn't really like it either on Injustice for All.
Really? So through the whole time that he was with you, he wasn't into the singing?
Yeah, he was getting more and more comfortable with it, I'm guessing. But he just wanted to get it done so he didn't have to worry about it anymore. He was not too happy about it.
Interesting. When he's in the studio, would he be like a one-take kind of guy, or how was he?
No, we'd do bits. And we would probably go back and double the bits once we've done them. So we had 2 tracks running all the time.
That's cool. So from Master of Puppets, do you remember working on Sanitarium?
Oh, yeah. There's a lot of shit going on there. That's me and a lot of AMS stereo delays. If you listen to it on headphones, you'll actually hear that the beginning is the rhythm guitars are mono. And then at one point, it just goes whack into stereo. And that's me flicking a switch on an AMS stereo delay, harmonizer thing. So that's actually made like that.
And the stuff like that, is that all you, like your creative ideas, or does the band input that kind of stuff?
That's me and me growing up with Roy Thomas Baker as my favorite producer. So
that's cool. So how do you feel about Master of Puppets getting a resurgence in popularity because of Stranger Things?
I loved it. I thought they should have made more of that shit. I thought it was fantastic. I really loved it. It was fantastic. It was so great.
Were you already a fan of the show?
I was already a fan of the show, yeah.
That must have been a cool little surprise.
It was like, okay, so now I'm in fucking Stranger Things. All right, cool.
Did you know that was going to happen?
Nope. I saw people starting talking about it online. So I went, I'm going to have to see that episode. But I was like I was lagging behind I was at the season before that. So I had to, see like a lot because it's in the end of the last season they made so far. But it's really, really good. And they more or less played the whole song.
So did Metallica have to give their approval for it, or did it go through the label to get that on the show?
I have no idea. I have to ask them. I'm guessing that they have been asking if they could do it. And probably some lawyers, and they probably made some kind of deal. But it's been good for Metallica. I mean, Master of Puppets resold a hell of a lot of copies, so there you go. Nothing bad with that.
100%. So last time we spoke, you compared Master of Puppets to One in the sense of these are longer songs that have lots of time changes and everything, basically. Yeah. Of the two, Master of Puppets or One, which is, in your opinion, the more difficult song to record? Like, how would you compare the two processes for those songs?
I mean, the sessions were pretty different, as one was made in Copenhagen and the other one was made in Los Angeles. On Master of Puppets, there were more people hanging out in the studio due to the fact that they were all there and they were living so close by. And sometimes during the Justice for All session, it would just be me and Lars doing the drums, and people would be more like, just in the studio with me. Because we were working so hard, so everybody except me got time off. But I never thought about there should be any difference to that. I mean, it was a song. Once you hear a song and you find out what it's all about, it's about making that song the best version of that song as possible. And songs are, in that sense, not comparable. So my answer would be, I don't have any recollection that there should be any difference in the way it was approached.
So what was the biggest difference between making Ride the Lightning and Master of Puppets at your studio in Denmark versus making Injustice in Los Angeles? For example, in Denmark, you guys would play poker together after recording sometimes. Was it the same thing in Los Angeles?
There was none of this here. Because we were working so hard, but we were still hanging out. But because we were in LA, the odd band members would piss home to San Francisco on and off. If me and Lars had like drum tracks to do for a week, James would piss home to his family, and he would come back and listen and go, "Hey, maybe you should change the." It was stuff like that. But it was work, and it was really funny, actually. It was a good spirited recording. Everybody was on their mark, and everybody was doing their best. We worked for 4 or 5 months, like 14 hours a day. So it was getting down to it, and I remember some of the songs were like really, really good. And I really enjoyed it. I thought, wow, we're gonna kick ass here. So awesome. We would work hard to get the level of perfection we wanted, and that would also mean that we would like record in bits. We'd get one good bit, and then we'd punch in and continue from there. And that was tedious work because we wanted Metallica in those days always wanted the level. I mean, if they were this good, they wanted the level up here. They would always kind of challenge themselves, and that's why they improved all the time, because they weren't satisfied with their previous album, which should be the fuel that kind of lets you do albums, that you want to make it better the next time. I mean, once you've done the perfect album, you have to start doing something else, because there's no point in recording, is there? And also the inspirations for that was something else than what inspired them for Master of Puppets. They were trying to go more in a like Guns N' Roses kind of rock direction. But that more or less backfired since the sound on And Justice for All. I mean, And Justice for All is, as far as I have heard, the album that has inspired most people to make a band.
Do you recall your last day working with Metallica on Injustice?
Yeah. We were working all night, and I got up. We had like an all-nighter as usual, so I went home at like 5 a.m, and they were working with Toby Wright and doing some simple overdubs and shit, and I briefly came into the studio to say goodbye and I'll see you guys, because I was on a plane at 5. So I just went past the studio, said goodbye to everybody, and it was like hugs and everything. So yeah, cool. And then I slept all the way home on the plane for 12 hours.
That's awesome. So do you have a favorite Metallica song? Either one that you've worked on or one that you haven't?
I'm guessing it's a toss-up. I guess my favorite Metallica song is Sad But True. But that's because it's so heavy. But then otherwise it would have to be a toss-up between one, Master of Puppets, and Creeping Death. And maybe For Whom the Bell Tolls would get in there as well. It's like choosing your children. I can't do that.
So, I mean, they hit the top commercially with the Black Album, and then the follow-up albums, Load and Reload, were obviously quite different. What did you think of those two records?
I guess they're all right. I liked some of the songs. Some of the songs are killer. I mean, Unforgiven and all that. I think that's great.
Low Man Lyric's pretty good, too.
I think there's a lot of good songs on there. And I actually recently heard Escape from Ride the Lightning, which James hates. That's actually a pretty good song. I'm like, it's not that bad. I haven't heard it for like 5 years. So I was like, it's pretty good. No? Okay. So.
What did you think of Saint Anger?
Every second time I hear it, I go, fuck, that's so great. They dare do something new. Not just doing what they've always done. And then the times in between, I go, it sounds like the worst demo I've ever heard. So it's kind of like that. Sometimes I take it off after the first 10 seconds, and other times I listen to it to the end. It's very, because it's pretty demanding listening to. That snare sound is fucking annoying as hell, right?
What was your initial reaction when you first heard that snare?
I hated it. It's probably one of those loud things that, if you want it to be loud, that's what you do. But it was like, nah, didn't like it.
How do you feel about all the hate that Lars gets?
People can hate as much as they like. It's become like a national sport for some. Yeah, he was not the world's best drummer, but for Metallica, he is. And he evolved. He's gotten better and better. And, there's shit happened. I mean, from here to here, there was a huge development. I mean, so musically and technically, he's really, really good.
You mentioned to me once before that sometimes you and Lars would help Kirk write his guitar solos. How so exactly? Kirk would write his solos and then you and Lars would chime in?
It was kind of like a producer thing, He would always compose a solo for a song, come into the studio, play it for us. It was good. We would record it, and we would maybe sometimes change small bits because, there's a little boring bit there. And sometimes we didn't like it. And because Lars is so knowledgeable about music, and especially like hard rock music from the 80s and stuff, we would more or less go, well, here you have to play something that sounds like Richard Blackmore, and how about some chords here? And Kirk would come up with some stuff. So in the end, it is Kirk doing it and getting it, but he got advices from me and especially from Lars. I mean, Lars gets way too little credit for his creative inputs on Metallica. There would be absolutely no Metallica without Lars and his creativity.
When the whole Napster situation happened, and it was basically Lars who was leading the charge, and looking back at it, we know he was correct.
He was right, yeah.
Yeah. So how did you feel about that whole situation?
I felt it was good that somebody said something about that. I was totally on Lars's side, and I also had a lot of hate from a lot of people here, you know. And the strange thing is that some of the people who didn't understand it were people in the film business, because they were sure that was never going to happen to films. So when it started happening to films, I just went, ha ha, damn idiots. Anything that can be digitized will eventually be stolen and given away for free. So it's very simple. Don't digitize shit.
If you were to ever do another album with Metallica, like let's say down the road it happens, would you approach it the same way you did back in the 80s, or would you approach things a little bit differently?
I'll probably approach it differently, but that's because the band has evolved. They're more like playing together now than they were in those days. They were learning the skill of playing together when I had them. And in order to reach that level of perfection that we wanted on the albums, we had to record things bit by bit. So, yeah, I would probably do it differently.
That's cool.
And also, I think the way they work now, they actually write and record at the same time. So the writing process and the recording process is kind of blurring into each other. So it would be very different, yeah. When I recorded them, they had the songs done, finished when they came into the studio, because studios were so expensive then. Now their rehearsal room is their studio, so it's kind of blurring into each other.
When Metallica really took off, did you become like a local celebrity in Copenhagen? Like, what was that like for you personally?
No, not at all. I mean, even the 3 albums I did, that was probably one of my biggest, not problems, but that was one of the things that pissed me off most is I produced these 3 albums and they sold like shitloads of copies in the States and worldwide, and nobody really knew about it in Denmark. It was not until like a year or so after And Justice for All, after one kind of hit, that that people were like going, So I was like, hey, you heard the new Metallica album? Nobody knew, except for like, you know, the chosen few that was like the heavy metal underground in Copenhagen. But I mean, you know, I could talk about this band for hours and nobody would know what the fuck I was talking about. It was really strange, you know, selling like 500,000 copies in the States and nobody knew shit about it in Denmark. So it was like, what the hell?
So when did that change? Was it after the Black Album took off that things, I guess, retroactively got more recognition?
I think it started changing for real when Facebook kind of took off.
Oh, like that late in the game?
Oh yeah, because I mean, you know, it in the studio community kind of thing, you know, the record label studio community thing. Everybody knew who I was, and that was actually the most important thing to me.
So, you know, with Ride the Lightning, one of the folklores about that record is how much of Dave Mustaine's songwriting actually was influential on that record. Did you ever talk to Dave Mustaine about that album?
Never.
Have you ever?
Actually, I never spoke to Dave Mustaine.
Really?
Yeah, no, I never spoke to him.
Oh, I'm surprised to hear that.
I met him once, but I mean, most of the songs, at least the ones that has his credit on there, he co-wrote. So, I mean, they gave him credit for that.
Yeah.
I actually saw a post today on Twitter where one tweets with a cover of Rust in Peace, is this the best Megadeth album? Blah, and you can go and vote. And one of them was, Kill 'Em All, is this the best Megadeth album?
That's funny.
I enjoyed that.
So, you know, in terms of Kill 'Em All, I remember last time we spoke, you mentioned that the band didn't like the sound of Kill 'Em All. What exactly was it about the sound that they weren't into?
They thought that Kill 'Em All was too light, and you know, it didn't sound like the new kind of music that they felt thrash metal was. And that was more or less the assignment. Let's make a thrash metal sound, which we actually did on Ride and Master. I mean, Master is probably as close as you can get to perfecting thrash metal. That's also why And Justice for All sounds different, because we kind of felt we've been there and done it. So there was no point in doing that again. We felt that Master of Puppets was more or less like, we nailed it, so let's do something else.
Yeah. So it never crossed your mind to just do like Master of Puppets Part 2? You guys definitely wanted to do something different right off
No,
the bat?
no. Actually, one of the things I decided pretty early on in my career was that every time somebody would call me up and ask me to do something that sounded like Master of Puppets, I would turn it down because I could sit and do the same album over and over and over and over and over again for like years, and I didn't want to do that. So no, I think you should listen to the songs and to what they need and take it from there. I probably think that they also changed their songwriting a bit on each to fit where they were at in their life.
So I mean, this is a hypothetical question, but if Cliff hadn't died, do you think And Justice would be as dark?
I don't think it would be. There's one song on there.
To Live Is to Die?
Yeah, that's the one. Because that's a Cliff song, right?
Yeah.
That was probably the direction Cliff would have taken it. I'm pretty sure that Cliff's involvement in And Justice would have made it a different album.
It was an uncomfortable situation for him. Did you get that vibe when you were working with Jason?
I think Jason's big problem was that he was also a fan, so he was almost too much in a war. I mean, he should have just fucking stood his ground and told them to shut the fuck up and let him do whatever he wanted. And that would have probably, he might still have been the bass player. I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on there, and all the ifs. You can't really say that, but I know for a fact that it was one of the things that they hated about him, that he was a fan. They wanted him to be like, an equal contributor like Rob is now.
Yeah. So why did they bring him on if they had this thing against him from the beginning?
Ask them. I don't know. I had no part in that whatsoever.
Yeah.
I mean, it's no secret, what happened.
Yeah.
He was totally under-prioritized.
Just in terms of their approach to music, from your experience, how would you compare Jason's approach to recording bass to Cliff's approach? What's similar, what's different?
Jason was much more of a musician, kind of like technical musician. He knew his chords and his scales. And Cliff was more like a person who felt the song. And he would suddenly play something new, change it up, because he felt that once he did it. So you never knew what you got from Cliff. You knew it would be special, but you never knew what it was.
So Jason,
so he was like the Beethoven of the band, the guy that did the freaky stuff.
So Cliff was more musical, but Jason was more technical. Is that fair to say?
Probably, yeah, something like that.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So what was the working situation like during the making of And Justice for All?
We were working constantly. We were actually, we had the studio lockout. So we started at 10, 11 in the morning and would work through the night, and we'd eat out there and everything, and we'd go home and sleep. And then, we'd work for like 14 hours, go home, sleep, meet in the studio again. And we kind of, once we've done like long hours, we would push the start time with an hour. So we'd start at 11 instead of 10, so we could get some sleep. And in those 4.5 months or whatever it was, we had like 3 days off.
Really?
And one of them was because they were doing a photo shoot. And it was so crazy because we kept pushing the start time. So at one point we started at 5 in the morning.
Wow.
But it was just the next day. That was one of the days off. We kind of went around the clock by pushing the start time. We actually worked so many hours that we actually had eaten up a whole day.
Oh my goodness.
So that was one of the days off. So Kirk and James, when we did drums and would like piss off to San Francisco where they lived, because we were in LA. So they would like fly back and forth or drive back and forth. I don't know what they did, but they were all more or less no further than a phone call away.
Interesting. That's really cool.
And there was absolutely no touring during that time in the studio.
Okay.
None whatsoever.
So, last time we spoke, you mentioned that for Ride the Lightning and Master of Puppets, you guys always basically worked at night. So
Yeah.
I guess that was a bit more fluid with And Justice.
And Justice, we had the studio in lockout, so we decided when we should come. And as I said, we started at 10 in the beginning of the session, and we worked like from 10 till midnight, sometimes 1, 2 o'clock, go home, sleep, meet again at 10. So we would like arrange every day, once we were done, we'd go, okay, we need to sleep at least 6 hours. We'll meet at 10 tomorrow, stuff like that. But yeah, we more or less, nobody else came in. It was our studio for the full 6 months or whatever it was.
That's amazing. So it was the opposite with Ride the Lightning, right? Because you guys had to work at night because people had to come during the day. Is that correct?
That's true, yeah. In the studio in Copenhagen, we had 2 sessions each day. And it was like from 10 till 6, and then from changeover from 6 till 7. So we worked at night from 7 in the evening till like 3, 4, 5 in the morning.
Jeez Louise. So how did production start on And Justice for All?
Lars called me up like in November 87. And he said, quote, we got to do a new album. We booked the studio. We start January 3rd. We booked it for 4 months, and you're producing it. And I went, I can't. I'm booked. My wife was pregnant. I just couldn't leave for the States. I mean, I had to turn it down, and they hired Mike Clank. And I was like, shit, I really would love to have done that album. My wife beat them to it, and so she gave birth on December 10th. And then like 3 weeks into January, the phone rings in the Rasmussen residence, and this is like prior to cell phones. So it's like, landline, bing, ding-a-ling-ling. Hello. And it was Lars, and the only thing he said is, when can you come? Because they'd done fuck all for 3 weeks. They were still doing guitar sounds. And James hated it. And it was like, what the hell is going on here? So I kind of pushed everything, all my sessions. So I worked through the weekends and stuff, and moved some sessions so I could go over there on February 14th. And Justice is so much James kind of, coming to terms with some of his demons.
So the frayed ends of sanity. I love that intro.
How does it go?
Da-dum, da-da-da-da-dum.
That is because they asked me about that. And I went, yeah, that's from The Wizard of Oz. And they went, fuck. It's called the Something's March. You can actually find it on YouTube. I'll figure out what it's called. It's the
Yes.
Yeah, that's from The Wizard of Oz. That's the Munchkins March. That's the apes that are with the Wicked Witch of the North. They got wings and shit.
Yeah.
And when they march into the dark castle, that's the song you hear. And they played it and went, have you heard that before? I went, yeah, Wizard of Oz. And they went, fuck. So I actually think they cleared that. They had to clear that with Warner Brothers before we recorded it, because they didn't want to record it in case they got a lawsuit.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you actually about that. Yeah.
So I think they play like 10 cents an album to Warner Brothers, because I think they have the rights for that. So yeah, it's called March of the Munchkins or something like that.
I'm going to look it up right now, actually.
Yeah, if you can find it, it's crazy.
March of the
It's
Munchkins.
like Doris and the Tin Man looking out. It's great.
Yeah, you're right. It's called Here's the Wizard / March of the Munchkins by Thelma Carpenter. That's cool.
Does it say that on the album?
It just says, let me look it up again. I would never have thought that Metallica would be influenced by Wizard of Oz. That is pretty freaking cool.
It is, yeah. It's and they played it to me, and Wizard of Oz has been one of my favorite films like forever.
Really?
And I just went, yeah, that's from the Wizard of Oz, and they just went, fuck.
Yeah, it says it's from the original soundtrack from The Wiz, Thelma Carpenter.
Yeah.
Wow, that's crazy. So I mean, like, what other unexpected influences would there have been with Metallica? Like, I would never have thought Wizard of Oz. You know what I mean? Anything else like that?
I don't. Nothing that I discovered, because I would have told them. But I mean, there's probably thousands. they keep. I saw one recently. Was that Master of Puppets that sounded a bit like some crazy folk song or whatever? I saw
Possibly.
that on the internet recently. But I mean, inspiration. I mean, everybody gets inspired.
For sure. Is it true that at one point Metallica was considering Geddy Lee to produce Master of Puppets?
Yeah, that.
Really?
Yeah. That I think, as far as I've heard and read somewhere, he was in the picture.
The Master of Puppets. The song itself is arguably the most iconic metal song ever.
Yeah.
When you guys were making it, it's an 8.5-minute track. Did it ever strike you as this might be a bit long for a title track, or did you guys not care and just do it?
We never thought about the length of the songs. I mean, it was kind of the thing with Metallica. Songs are long. I probably told them the story about Bohemian Rhapsody, where you know, which is well-known story. They go up to him. I say, yeah, we've done this new single, blah blah blah. Oh, great, yeah, it's like opera. Yeah, great, yeah. And then they go, it's 7 minutes long. No fucking way.
Well, they were wrong.
They were wrong, yeah. I mean, so yeah, why should Metallica be wrong?
The thing that's really cool about a lot of Metallica songs, but specifically that song, is you can cut it up to like 3-4 different songs in and of itself. You know what I mean? Like there's so many different changes.
Yeah.
So like for you personally, what was your favorite part of that song, if you have one?
I think it's the combo. I think it's the whole song. I love the chorus part, really. I think it's really, really punchy and really good, and it kind of stresses a point. But yeah, I mean, I've never thought of it as parts of songs. To me, it's always been one thing that develops. It's a bit like one. It has a lot of different things as well.
Yeah.
And you know, even though you could probably do 3 or 4 songs out of that as well, to me, it's just that one song that develops, you know, into this.
Mm-hmm. After you guys finished Master of Puppets, they hadn't become super big yet. At that point, were you expecting them to become that big? Was it just a matter of time, in your opinion?
It was just, in my opinion, it was just a matter of time. But I mean, it's one of those things you can never be sure of in the music business, because you know, I mean, you have to be at the right spot at the right time with the right song, and that is, yeah, there's so much you can work as hard as you can, do all the right things for a whole life and not make it.
Yeah.
So I was hoping, I was expecting it, but I wasn't sure.
Yeah.
But I knew it didn't really matter, because I knew we'd done some killer albums, and that was it for me.
One thing you said from our last interview that kind of struck me as really interesting was, For Whom the Bell Tolls, you mentioned that it was an anvil that created the bell sound, if I'm not mistaken.
I'm pretty sure, yeah.
So the question to me is, and I thought of this afterwards, is like, where did you find an anvil, and why did you think of using an anvil?
Because they wanted that sound of, you know, like, it was a metal band. Come on, you know, you forge metal on an anvil.
Yeah.
We I don't know where we got it from. We might have borrowed it from somebody in the backyard where the studio was.
Okay.
I remember carrying that thing up the stairs. It was heavy as shit. And Lars banging away on it with a hammer. It was ridiculous. We actually stuck it in a stairwell at the back of the studio and put the mics at the other end of the stairs and recorded it like that.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting. What was your funniest experience on Ride the Lightning?
No, there was a lot of funny experiences with Ride the Lightning. Watching Cliff play bass on the songs, because Cliff didn't like headphones. So we had 2 really big JBL speakers, which was the same as the ones we had in the control room. Uh-huh. So I rigged those in the main room and stuck his amp in another room. And I would blast the tracks for Cliff, and he would play like he played live. So he would play to what came out of the speakers instead of wearing headphones. Huh. And, you know, seeing him, you know, jumping up and down was like, that was hilarious.
That's awesome. That's great to hear. Is there any one memory you have of Cliff Burton or the Burton family that's special for you?
Yeah, it's the late night after we were done recording Master of Puppets. Mm-hmm. You know, the nights, you know, once the session started at 7, when it was like 4 in the morning, 5, half past 4, we would sit and play poker, me and the guys, and I was always wondering why they weren't busy going home sleeping till I found out that it was because the buffet at the Scandinavia Hotel where they stayed opened at 6 a.m.
Yeah.
But we were sitting there playing poker, and Cliff was always crazy about wild cards. So it was always like one-eyed jacks and black deuces, and it was you could get like 4 aces in 3 cards. But it was fun. And we didn't, we played for pennies, so it was not, it was just to pass time. But it was really fun.
Yeah.
It was one of those moments where you kind of feel like a family.
Yeah. At what point did you, I guess this probably happened during Ride the Lightning. At what point did you transition from being the producer to being their friend? Like, when did that happen?
That happened during Ride the Lightning.
Yeah. That's cool.
Because the reason why they chose me was because they liked the stuff I'd done and they wanted to learn about production. So I kind of, told them everything I did. It was so at one point they called me Daddy, which was, I'm like 3 years older than them, 4 maybe. So it was like, well, okay, fine, yeah, okay, yeah. And that was obviously for fun, but it was still crazy to be called Dad by people almost your own age. But
that is
funny. And we kind of got. I mean, we just got into that music thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I totally loved it. And there's that story with my partner at the time that comes and asks me if I'm all right. Mm-hmm. He kind of comes and says, "Hey, Flemming, are you okay?" "Yeah, what?" And he's like, "Yeah, because I've been listening to some of the stuff they're doing. I mean, they can't play." And I was like, "What the fuck are you talking? It's the best thing I've ever done. Listen to that energy." And he came from a jazz background. He totally did not understand it. It was a bit like Lars's father.
Oh, okay.
Lars's father came at one point when we were doing Ride the Lightning, and we were listening to some of the takes we'd done on one of the songs, and they fuck everything up, and it goes total haywire, and they stop, and he goes, "That's the kind of thing we want to hear." And I'm like, "Shut the fuck up."
That's funny.
Jazz versus thrash metal, not really a good combo.
Jazz fusion metal. Yeah. That actually kind of makes sense what you're saying, because I read in an interview recently, Kirk Hammett mentioned that during Ride the Lightning, Lars felt just at home, but that Kirk, totally. James, and Cliff kind of felt a little homesick. Did you get that vibe from them at all?
Oh, yeah. They were really homesick. Yeah, they kept bitching about the Danish girls not being like accessible enough and shit like that. Oh, and Lars was having the time of his life. But I mean, they still decided on making Master in Copenhagen again. Because I went studio shopping with Lars like for 10 days or so, like half a year before we started recording Master of Puppets, like in the spring, because they wanted to record it in the States, and we were trying to find a studio where we could get more or less the same ambient drum sound, and that had a room like the room we stuck his drums in, which was basically a huge warehouse, wooden warehouse that sounded really amazing.
Yeah.
And they decided to record Master in Copenhagen. I had nothing to say about that. It was the band's decision.
What is it about Kirk in particular, for example, that sticks out to you about his guitar playing? What is unique about him to you?
It's his whole style, I think. I think he's got, the Kirk Hammett style. I think he's got his own personal flavor. I think he's gotten... For some reason, I think he's massively improved over the last 5 to 10 years. It's like he's finally come to terms with who he is and what his part is in the band, and he's totally enjoying it, and that's actually making him play better and better. And it was a pleasure to see Kirk, like, being as confident as he is on stage, because he probably felt that he was more or less sidetracked at some points during the Metallica career. I'm not sure, but that's just my feeling. And I think that now he's more or less, kind of established himself as Kirk Hammett.
That's cool.
And that's really pleasing for me to see, that he's got his part in the band and he's doing his thing and contributing, which is great.
100%. I mean, the band's gone through so many changes. It's cool to see them still
Yeah,
evolving.
yeah, yeah. They're still developing.
Yeah. So I guess one of the starkest changes of the band was not just the Black Album, but afterwards with Load and Reload. For you,
Yeah.
what did you think of those two records? Because there's a lot of conflicted views on those records.
It took me a while to get into them. Let me say it like that. I wasn't like totally duped. Like I mean, when I heard the Black Albums, I was blown away. I thought it was fantastic. And then Load and Reload was like, yeah, I didn't really know. There's still some good songs. I mean, you know, The Unforgiven is a fantastic song.
Oh, yeah.
And, you know,
Low Man's lyrics pretty good, too.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, Unforgiven 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and I don't know how many verses they've done on it.
That's funny.
But yeah. No, they never really got that much time on my record player.
Do you have a favorite Metallica song? I remember you mentioned the albums are like your children, but do you have a favorite song?
Yeah. Sad but true.
Sad but True?
It's probably the heaviest song ever written, and I totally love it. I love when bands play slow. It's a bit like Harvester and Sorrow and The Thing That Should Not Be, but Sad but True is just they totally nailed it.
That's awesome.
I love it.
Do you think you'd ever work with Metallica again?
You know, in this business, you never know. I'll be up for it for sure.
That's cool.
Maybe just record, one song. I don't know, whatever, something. It could be fun. It would be interesting to see if we meet again in the studio, whether we all fall back to the parts we had.
Yeah.
Because there's a tendency, once you've been away from each other for a long time and you get together, like within the first 5 minutes, you totally go back to the parts you had when you split.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That would be really cool.
It would be great. Yeah, I'd love that.
Yeah. So what did you think of their most recent record, 72 Seasons?
I think it's really, really good. I think there's some really good songs on there.
Mm-hmm. Of all the different Metallica songs you've worked on, was there any one in particular that stuck out to you?
I think the making of the song Sanitarium, Welcome Home on Master kind of stuck out because we did a lot of stuff with sounds and shit that actually succeeded. That was like, we were like, yeah, baby. That stuck out, really. I mean, the guitar starts out in mono, and if you listen to it in headphones, at one point I flick a switch and it's all stereo, and if you hear it on headphones, you're going to get blown away. It sounds so good.
Yeah, for sure.
I test speakers with that song.
So another song in particular I wanted to ask you about is Battery. Do you know whose idea it was to have an acoustic intro?
I can't remember, but the acoustics was probably me saying, because they were just going to do clean guitars, and I gave Kirk and James an acoustic, and I said, no, you're doing this fucking acoustic. And they went, no, you can't do that in metal. Yes, you can. Go. But I'm pretty sure that must have been Cliff.
Really? It was Cliff's idea?
Intro.
Oh, yeah. You think Cliff actually played the guitar on...
No, but he's probably the guy who said, we need an intro.
Okay.
But I don't know. I mean, it's, 4 years ago?
Yeah.
I can't even remember where it was yesterday.
I have that problem too. Master Puppets is the band's arguably biggest song. On the other side is Escape, the kind of the commercial song they wanted for Ride the Lightning.
Yeah.
When you guys were making that song, I mean, I've read that the band intentionally did it for the sake of hopefully getting some radio play. Did you guys like the song at all, or was it always just kind of like the throwaway song?
It was always kind of like the throwaway song that we did to please the commercial side of the business, because they were on Megaforce then and trying to get a major deal. They actually don't get that till after Ride the Lightning has been released. Ride the Lightning is being released on Megaforce as well. And then like 3 months into, and they've sold like 500,000 copies, Elektra buys Metallica or signs Metallica and gets the rights to publish Ride the Lightning. So I have it in two versions, a Megaforce and an Elektra version. And I'm pretty sure they didn't do it because of Escape.
That's a fair statement.
Yeah. And it all comes back to, one of the sayings in the music businesses is, don't please anybody but yourself, because you don't know what people want. So don't even try to please them, because they don't know what they want. So how the hell should you? Just please yourself. That's what making music is all about, getting what you feel out through the music, and, trying to please whatever or the latest trends in fashion. Just don't go there.
Is it fair to also be influenced by the times?
Be inspired. Don't copy.
So Flemming, what was the atmosphere like in Metallica when Cliff was in the band compared to when Jason was in the band?
All the time Cliff was in the band, it was like these four kids that had known each other for a long time, that kind of, it's us against the world, and they were all, they're basically fighting the Metallica fight. We need to make Metallica the best thing ever. It kind of changed a bit when Jason entered the band, which is also well documented, because Jason was a fan and they actually hated that about him. That's probably also part of the story about the missing bass on Injustice for All. They just probably tried to get a reaction from him, but he was still too new in the band to do anything. I'm guessing what they wanted him to do was to speak out and be his own personality, so, which is always more interesting than, fans can be annoying, right? Everybody who just says yes and you're great to everything you do, that's not very good. And I think eventually he got fed up with being, the new kid for such a long time. But, during the Justice for All recordings, that thing hadn't come yet. So it was, as far as I'm concerned, all hunky-dory. We were all happy and doing it. Jason actually, because we got into a bit of a time trouble, so he actually recorded the basses at night while we were sleeping with the assistant engineer Toby, and we would, like, before he started, would say, you do this and that, just play through with him a couple of times, and he would, like, kind of perfect that during the night. So the bass tracks on Injustice for All are actually really, really, really good, though nobody ever heard them except me, Jason, and a couple of other guys. And then we come in the morning and check it out, and everybody was really happy. So there you go. But it was slightly different because he was new, and also because he was so much a fan.
Were you surprised with how in the final mix the bass essentially isn't there?
Oh yeah, I was like, what the? I went, okay, that's the way to do it, but I think some of my rough mixes are actually better than that. But buy the huge the anniversary box, the big with the vinyls and stuff. There's one full CD of my rough mixes. That sounds pretty good. But yeah, it's a statement in time. People always ask, why don't they ask you to remix it? No, because it's out. It's done, and then that's the way it is. You can't go back and change it, because it would be something totally different. It was like when McCartney remixed Let It Be. It sounded really boring because he took all the quirkiness that Phil Spector done. Those kind of things. So just leave it. It is the way it's supposed to be. So yeah, I'm a fan of that album anyway. Even though I can't hear the bass. Also, that album is probably one of the albums in the history of music that inspired most bands to start. There's a lot of metal bands out there that if you ask them, why did you start the band? They say, well, we heard Injustice for All and we want to be like those guys. So, maybe we should turn the bass down on all music from now.
Did you ever talk to Jason about the missing bass? Did you ever get his thoughts on it?
No, unfortunately not, no. I'd love to. I was supposed to meet him a couple of years ago, and then, timing and all this stuff, and it went haywire, because it would have been great to have heard what, for me and him to sit down and talk about it. But I think it's a mix between them trying to get a reaction from Jason and them not, them meaning Lars and James, not having processed Cliff's dead yet, and actually still mourning. and not come to terms with the fact that he wasn't in the band anymore because he was dead. So yeah, but I don't know. I mean, you're gonna have to talk to the guys about that. But that's my guessing.
One thing I've never really understood about the whole situation is that even if you're looking to haze Jason for whatever reason, by removing the bass, the whole album suffers to a certain extent, unless, of course, the band felt it sounded better without the bass.
They probably thought that the bass was going to be like, the low end of the guitar riff, which is basically what it is now. I'm pretty sure if you had the mix up and you like turned the bass off, you would hear the difference. So it's definitely there, although it's not as pronounced as it is in a lot of other albums. But yeah, it is strange, yeah. But, I mean, maybe they sat down and heard it and went, that's fucking great. I can hit my drums are loud, the guitars are loud, the vocal are loud. Fine. Next.
You brought up a point a couple of moments ago about Cliff's death, which of course is one of the biggest tragedies in metal history. For you personally, how did you hear the news and what was your reaction to it, if I may ask?
It was horrible. I was sleeping at my house and my mom called me because she gets up earlier than I do. And she said, one of the guys in Metallica died. I was like, what? And she didn't know which one it was. So I had to, make a lot of phone calls and just to find out what the hell is going on. But it was in all news in Denmark had the story. So and this was before the internet. So, you had to listen to radios and, call people. But yeah, it was devastating. I mean, they were on the way to play a gig in Copenhagen. We were going to meet up that afternoon, right? And bus fucking turns over. When Cliff was in the band, they were, you gotta understand the 3 albums I did with Metallica, it was like on the rise. Every album just went one level higher all the time, and it's always easier when you can see it's getting better and better and better. Once you get to the top and have to stay there, that's when all the problems sets in, which everybody knows if they've seen their movie.
No, for sure. So what was Cliff like in the studio? From what I've heard, he was the most musically gifted. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, he was the only one that actually been schooled in music. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if he was the better musician. I rate James pretty high up there as one. I think James is probably the best rhythm guitar player in the world. But he was definitely the most schooled music-wise, and some of the parts he came up with were things that nobody in a metal band would ever have done except for Cliff. So yeah, he was great, and he was just a mellow, kind, dude that we hung out. We recorded at night, and we kind of made it so that we started at 7. Actually, on Master of Puppets, we started at 6 at my house, and they came at 8. We and my wife made dinner for them, and then we discussed what we needed to do during the night, and we'd walk to the studio from my house, which was like 3 minutes. And once we'd finished recording, it would be 4 or 5, something like that. And they would always make sure they got to the hotel, because they were staying at a hotel on Master of Puppets, because now they were on a major label, so they could afford it. And the morning buffet opened at 6, so they always they were there at 6 so they could eat breakfast buffet and then go to bed and sleep till they got up and got to my house to eat dinner. So during that time, once we're done and they were going to waste an hour or so, we were sitting, having a beer, playing poker. He liked playing poker. So yeah, he was just a cool dude to hang out with. He was really nice, really gentle. Knew a lot of stuff about things, so you could sit and talk with him for hours and hours.
That's awesome. When it comes to your studio, one of the interesting things about your relationship with Metallica, in my opinion, is that during the making of Ride the Lightning, they slept in your studio instead of getting a hotel.
Yeah.
And they slept during the day and recorded at night. Something along those lines?
No, it was just in those days the studios were pretty booked. So we had, as a standard, we had a 10 to 6 schedule, and then a 1 hour changeover, and then 7 till basically we should be done before 9 because then the morning engineer came in. But we could have worked. The good thing about working at night was that you could actually work as long as you wanted, but you'd still only pay for one session. So they actually got a few more hours out of that. And I mean, most musicians are used to working at night. I sent Kirk to the showers once because he smelled. I think the first song we actually did on Ride the Lightning was the Ride the Lightning song, but I'm not sure. But it was either that or Creeping Death. It was one of the really long songs. Remember that choir thing where they shout die, and we overdubbed that tons of times. And I sent them all in there. And I was, at one point, we'd done like 5 or 6 takes, and they came in and had a listen. I think we should do some more. And I kind of instructed Lars to say, on this take, because I knew that Cliff was just faking it. He wasn't singing. So I said to everybody, on this take, just fake it, just so we can hear whether Cliff is singing or not. And they went in and no sound came out. So I was like, Cliff, you fuck. So yeah, but I mean.
That's hilarious. Why wasn't Cliff singing?
Because he didn't like the sound of his voice. I don't know. Maybe he thought he couldn't sing. He's a bass player. You never know what happens in the minds of a bass player.
So at what point did you realize that the band was going to be huge?
During recording of Ride the Lightning. Already then I knew this was going to be something special. I couldn't be sure that they would, that they would actually make it, but it didn't really matter because I thought the music and the sound and everything was so good that no matter what, that I knew this was going to be an album I would be proud of. So, yeah. Sometime halfway through Ride the Lightning.
So when it comes to the recording process for Ride the Lightning, from what I understand, you recorded Lars's drum parts in a warehouse?
Yeah, also on Master of Puppets, yeah.
Was there any particular reason why you chose the warehouse to record his drum parts?
To get a really good drum ambience, to get the sound to be as loud as possible. And on all the albums we did, there was this mantra called no reverb. So instead of using reverb, I just recorded the sounds of the rooms we recorded in. Because that way you get some depth in the stereo picture. So we used a lot of room mics and stuff. That's why I put him in that room. It was a bit of a challenge because I think it was cold winter and we had to heat the room. It was like freezing outside. So we had these gas heated that kind of heated the room, which meant that we had to get a guy in and tune the drums all the time. But, it turned out good. So there you go.
So in terms of your relationship with Lars, from what I understand, you essentially gave Lars drumming lessons during Ride the Lightning. Is this correct?
Yeah, that's actually true. That comes from Lars being from a jazz background. Because I can't be sure about this, but I'm pretty sure that Lars's focus with Metallica was on doing all these great fills. So I think the way Lars saw the songs was, I have this fill that goes, then it's, and then this fill comes in. And I think he never gave it much thought that, what happens between the fills, you have to be fucking steady and there have to be an equal length between the kick and the snare and all this stuff. So yeah, me and Jake, his real name is also Flemming, but his drum roadie at the time, who was a drummer for a Danish band called Maltese Falcon, I think. We kind of, told him, then you go boom, boom, took his leg, and when you do this, and then you do this with the snare, and they have to be, and I don't think he ever thought about that. He just thought about putting energy into the song. So basically he played like a jazz drummer. You listen to what everybody else is doing, you do something that fits in, fine. Next song.
That's funny. And so how did he develop as a drummer from Ride the Lightning to Injustice?
Well, all of them actually developed tremendously, and it was a huge development, both in their playing skills, but also in their songwriting. In my opinion, they got better and better musicians from album to album. But with Metallica, we've always set the bar really high. Actually, they've always aimed to do stuff they couldn't do. So actually, they're always pushing themselves to be better and better, and it was like that with all the albums I've done. And basically they weren't able to perform their own songs because they were too difficult, but we got it on tape anyway. which is a great way to develop as a musician and, just basically get your chops together. So, yeah, I mean, they've developed tons during that. And even also with the songwriting, I mean, in my opinion, they've gotten better and better at songwriting as well throughout their whole life. So, yeah, they developed a lot.
So Flemming, when you first started working with Metallica, essentially they reached out to you. How did that all come together?
It was Lars calling up, I'm, as far as I recall, asking whether I would be interested in doing a metal band from San Francisco. And I went, yeah, great. I mean, but you're Danish, so what, So they had kind of done the math and figured out that for the same amount of money they would pay for a week in a studio in the States, and they were not happy with the sound on Kill 'Em All, they could get 2 weeks in Europe. Plus, they could then go and do some shows and actually make money to do the album, because they were on an independent label. They didn't have like a label backup. So they wanted to tour, record more. And they, as far as I've been told, they've heard about me because of the job I did with Rich Blackmore, and I think they sat down and heard some of the albums I've done, and then they decided, well, that's what we're doing. We're gonna go to Europe. We're gonna record the album, and at the same time, or during that, they got Q Prime as management. So they started looking for major record label deals. But, I mean, basically they just called and asked if I was interested. And I said, yes, sure. And we actually started the process out once they got to the studio and we needed to start recording. We actually started out by listening to Kill 'Em All because there's the famous break-in incident in their live truck. So they get most of their equipment stolen. And James had a modified Marshall amp that he really likes, and of course nobody knew what the modification was. So we actually listened to Kill 'Em All a couple of times and some of the guitar sounds. So I got a pretty good picture of what the band was all about before we started. We did a session in the studio where we got everybody that I knew on the metal scene then, which was kind of just starting out, but people that had good Marshall gear. I had them bring all their amps and all their cabinets to the studio, and James would, play them all and figure out which one he wanted to record on.
One of the songs on that album that sticks out to me is Fade to Black. Do you remember recording that particular song?
Yeah, I actually do, because I really like it too, and that was one of the songs that, in my memory, that didn't take that long to record, because I think they all really liked it, so they all played it really well. But yeah, obviously it took the time it should. But yeah, it's a good song. I like it.
For me, one of the reasons that song sticks out on that record is that it's very different in a lot of ways from the other tracks on Ride the Lightning. It's the band's first ever power ballad. For that reason, was the band apprehensive at all about recording Fade to Black?
Not to my recollection, no. I think Cliff was probably involved in the songwriting of that big time. I could imagine Fade to Black. I haven't seen the credits, but I would imagine that all that was Cliff, and they kind of, said, well, yeah, you let yourself rip. But no, I've no apprehensions about that. They were more like, there was some discussions whether or not, what is it? Is it Escape? That was like that kind of commercial song.
Escape's the one.
Yeah, that was, because that was kind of their giveaway to get a major label deal, that they recorded that so that, if eventually they could have a single. It's never been released as a single, I think, but that was kind of what they thought. We'll do this shorter song, which has like a singable riff to it, and which was more like what everybody else was doing in the 80s. That was what we discussed, not the other stuff. No, not Fade to Black at all. That we kind of just went, yeah, that's cool, let's get going with that.
Another one of the great songs on Ride the Lightning is For Whom the Bell Tolls. How did you guys get that bell sound specifically?
I'm pretty sure, I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's Lars hitting an anvil with a metal hammer. And then we sped it down so it sounded like a bell. But I mean, they have the tape, so obviously they use that sound for the live shows. But it's either that or we took it off some effects album, and which was a vinyl then. You buy it and then you have the right to use it on. But I'm pretty sure, because the studio was on the first floor, and we carried that anvil up to the first floor, and it was like seriously heavy. And Lars was banging away on it. It was actually it was one of the funny moments when we did that album. Lars hitting the anvil. No, not on one, Lars, on two. What the fuck is two? He just put it where he felt for it. Lars is grown up in a jazz family, so Lars is playing always when he plays, he listens to what everybody else is doing and fits in. People saying Lars is a bad drummer, I think people who says that kind of exclude themselves, in my opinion, because they don't know what they're talking about. It's like people saying Ringo Starr is a bad drummer. They have no idea. I don't know what that is all about. It's probably people who play instrument themselves and think they're technically good. But, that's not what it's about. It's about playing music. And if you don't have that musical mind, you can be as technically good as you want. If you can't play with other people, you're fucked.
Do you remember Cliff ever playing any instruments in the studio aside from the bass?
I have this vision of him playing an acoustic guitar, but it could be just me imagining it. Not on tape, anyway. He only played bass on tape, so. But I'm pretty sure he was sitting with you have guitars lying around in the studio everywhere, and I'm pretty sure he picked one up.
So, of course, the last Metallica studio record Cliff appeared on is Master of Puppets. What was the vibe like in the studio during the making of that record?
We had this vision of Master of Puppets in our heads, and it was all the same vision, and that's why that album is so great, because everybody wanted to go where we ended, and we all sort of pulled in the same direction, so it was really good.
When it came to the title track, Master of Puppets, did you feel that there was going to be something special about this song?
Yeah, we kind of knew that also because we knew it was going to be the title track. Metallica always do serious pre-production, so we already knew the running order once we started recording the album. We didn't record them in order, but, we knew that was going to be significant. Also because the lyrics are so strong. And, the whole story about who controls your life and what you're doing, it was, it's kind of a universal story. So we knew that right off the bat. We didn't know that they were going to play it like 40 years later, but,
Yeah, for sure. In another interview of yours, I remember you mentioning that during the Master of Puppets session for Sanitarium particularly, James was reluctant to record vocals for one of the high parts of that song because he didn't want to go that high.
Yeah.
What was the story there exactly?
Well, it's difficult to sing high, especially if you're a man. I don't know whether we cheated by speeding the tape down. I know that some of the songs on Master of Puppets, we actually recorded them lower and then very speeded them up so that it got even tighter. That's one of the tricks you can use in the studio. But yeah, I can't remember that specific thing. It was just hard for him to do that, and of course, if you can skip it, you want to do it. It's work. So, yeah.
And how is he as a singer to work with? Is he easy to work with in studio?
Oh, yeah, he's fabulous. James is the kind of person that once he's in a working situation, he's totally focused, and he just wants to perform as well as possible, and he knows when he fucks up. I mean, if you sit doing a rhythm guitar tracks and he fucks up, he stops immediately, you just go back a bit, punch in, and continue. He knows exactly what he's doing. He's a very skilled musician.
That's awesome. So in terms of all three records you worked on, I'm sure that the gear that they used changed.
Oh, yeah.
Did it make a significant difference to how you approached recording them?
Yeah, it actually did, because on Master of Puppets, they had the Mesa Boogie endorsement. So we got these Mesa Boogie amps that we were going to use on the album. And I thought they were kind of goofy because, they didn't really do, when it's a treble and you gave it more, it actually got duller. There was a lot of stuff going on with those. But, I mean, in the end, they ended up sounding really, really good. Obviously, Master of Puppets is sounding pretty well. But I actually inserted on the insert loop at the back of the amp, I inserted like a professional parametric parametric studio EQ, so I could actually sit in the control room and EQ the amp, the actual amp itself, because I needed to scoop out some of that mid-range, and there was a lot of stuff we did on that. On my old website, which is still up, I have a lot of these notes from the Master of Puppet sessions, and they all have the settings for that parametric EQ on the insert. So yeah, you can go check that out.
Oh, definitely. For me, when it comes to that record, I think one of the underrated songs is Damage Inc. That 1 minute intro where there's all these different, echoey sounds. How did you guys get that?
That is all guitars recorded backwards. A bit like the beginning of Battery. It's the same thing with all those. That's, it's all backwards shit that you reset and you just turn the chord progression around and you turn the tape around, and then once you play it back, you get that kind of freaky acid kind of sound. So yeah, most of that is backwards stuff. I haven't heard it recently, so but I'm sure if I sat down and heard it now, I would be able to tell you what it is. But yeah, a lot of it was probably backwards guitars.
That is awesome. In my opinion, another underrated track from that record is Orion. When it comes to songs like that, Orion and The Call of Ktulu, these instrumental tracks, do you approach recording those songs differently because they're instrumental?
No, same approach, just one job less. That was the lead vocal. But normally on instrumental songs, there were like these huge solos. So actually it's a bit more difficult to record instrumentals because once you don't have the vocals, you need a focus point. So you had to do really interesting, themes and solos and melodies all through the song to make sure that the listener is still paying attention, basically. So yeah, no, it was hard work.
Were you surprised that they had instrumental songs?
No, not really. Yeah, we did that already on the first album, so I'm like, okay, no songs, great. I thought it was a bit long. What's the instrumental on Ride? Ktulu, yeah. But I really like that, and I like the whole story about that. So, yeah.
Oh, for sure. Another great track, in my opinion, from Master of Puppets is Disposable Heroes. That song, to me, sounds like it could have also been on Injustice.
Yeah, it's where they're going after... I think what we did was that kind of thrash thing that we started on Ride the Lightning. We kind of perfect on Master of Puppets, and then, that's another thing I really like about the band. They don't repeat themselves. They don't do Master of Puppets 10 times like some artists. They do one great album and then they copy that like 15 times.
Yeah. In terms of Metallica's development and experimentation, one of the things I find interesting about the band's history is that James Hetfield was hesitant at first about being a singer.
He hated it. It was the painstaking moments when James had to go sing, he wouldn't do it. He just got more and more confident with, once you start selling 500,000 album copies, you kind of go, all right, then they must like it somehow. So I think his confidence grew. And I think the voice is an instrument as well, and he wanted to get better on that. Whether he took singing lessons, I have no idea. He never did when he was with me, when I recorded them. But for sure, his interest in what he could do with the vocal grew as the band matured.
And so in studio, how did he approach recording vocals on the 3 albums you did with the band? Was his approach different each time?
It got more and more serious, and he got better and better at it. We simply did, we did a couple of takes, run-throughs that I kept as much as possible. And then once his voice was like warmed up and ready, we did it line by line from start to finish. And then most of the time we doubled a lot of the bits to make it sound thicker. So he sang it twice on top of each other, which is a skill and which he got better and better at. Because you need to know what you just did. Even when you do phrasing, you need to know what you did if you have to put one right on top of it. But sometimes you don't want it right on top because it sounds better when they shit like the studio stuff.
Yeah. So how have they grown over the years as people? For example, like we discussed before, James was a bit of a hesitant singer during Ride the Lightning, but by Master of Puppets and Injustice, he's really embracing it. How was that experience for you, seeing them grow and develop over time?
It made me really, really proud. Lars describes it pretty well, that they came from after have done Kill 'Em All as young kids who didn't have a clue about how to record an album, and he basically has the opinion that I taught them to record albums, which makes me pretty proud. But they've all grown into men. I think they've grown into wise and clever men. I know James has problems with his addictions, but I mean, who doesn't in this world? So that's his thing, and I'm sure he's going to tackle it. And if he falls back on it, yeah, well, it's fixable. So, there's a lot of things going on in people's heads, but I think they've grown to become really, really good people, and very, very friendly, if you ask me.
When you first met Metallica in 1984 during the making of Ride the Lightning, what was your initial impression of them?
They were, in my opinion, a bunch of young kids with like fire in their ass. They were like fucking going 200 miles an hour, like 24/7. And it was actually inspiring that they had this energy and that they were willing to go the extra mile for that common project that was Metallica. It's what most bands have when they start out, but the way they've handled the project Metallica during the years is second to none. I think they've done a fabulous job of being themselves, being Metallica, and also taking care of the brand Metallica. And I think they've done a good job about that.
Have they kept that fire, in your opinion?
On and off, yeah. I think they're getting there again. I think the last album was killer. It was almost like, okay, let's do an album like in the old days. I was like, yes, please. I actually told Lars that what the fuck is it? What's it called? Hardwired to Self-Destruct. Yeah. He was asking what I thought about it, and I said, that's the first album you've done in 20 years that I wish I'd done. And he was like, that's the best criticism I've ever gotten.
That's awesome. And so we spoke a little earlier about how the changes in Metallica's gear from album to album caused you to modify how you recorded them to an extent, at least on a technical level. But equipment aside, did you change the way you approached working with them from album to album, or did you have more or less the same approach?
Well, I had more or less the same approach, and which is the approach I'm still having, which is make sure everybody is feeling good. Because, they're in recording an album is probably the apart from playing probably Madison Square Garden or, royalty and stuff like that, it's the peak for every band. Because whatever you do in the studio with me, people are going to talk about that for the rest of your life because, it's going to come out there. So we talk a lot about vibe with Metallica. The vibe has to be there. We start out by basically getting every gear in, making sure everybody feels comfortable doing all the sounds. And in the case of Metallica, we always starting doing B-sides for singles, which was always like cover songs. Because, in a process in the studio, you always tend to get the sound right after a couple of songs. You always tweak and tweak and tweak. And in my opinion, it's stupid starting out with your very best song as the first song you record, and then once you've gotten to song 3, everything sounds the way it's supposed to. So we always started out doing some of the cover songs, and then once we got that out of the way and we thought every sound was like right bang where it was supposed to be, we'd start doing their songs.
That's awesome. Is there any one solo of Kirk's that sticks out to you?
The end solo on one is, in my opinion, top 3 in terms of guitar solos in the world.
Do you remember recording one?
Yeah.
What was that experience like?
It was, I liked it. I thought it was one of the best songs that they ever done. So yeah, it was a pleasure recording that, and Lars played really well on that.
I read somewhere that the part in one where the drums start to mimic the sound of machine guns, you got that in one take.
Yeah, that's the kind of stuff Lars was a champion at the time. So yeah, that was, I was actually disappointed because I was looking forward to hearing that particular part of the song like a couple of times, but it was like, okay, fine, good, next. And he was like, what? Yeah, fine, come and have a listen. He didn't believe it himself. We heard it and went, okay, we'll go on. I've always thought Lars was a great drummer. So, I know a lot of people says he can't play drums, but I mean, what do they know? So, yeah, no, he's a great drummer. And he'd gotten technically better at that point. That doesn't necessarily mean you're a better drummer, that you're technically better, but if you have the musical understanding and the insight Lars has, that made him a better drummer, yeah. As James says, he's the best drummer in Metallica ever. So, there you go.
With the intro where you have the sound of the helicopters and gunfire, etc., I'm assuming you didn't actually go to a war zone to record those sounds, so where did those sounds come from?
That's all taken from sample CDs. I actually have no recollection of doing that at all. I knew it was going to be there, but I don't think we did that. I think they stuck that in there when they mixed. They always set the bar high, so they actually write songs that they have difficulty playing because it is so difficult. And especially on Injustice, that was pretty crazy. But I mean, we ended up doing Injustice more or less like you would have done it today, because there's tons of edits. I mean, Lars would record like half a minute of drums, and then if there's one hit that was slightly off, I would just edit a piece out of the tape. If one was slightly too early, I would take one of the bits I've edited out earlier and edit that in, so there's like edits on all the drum tracks. And that's what you can do now on digital workstations, which is what everybody's using to record on. But in those days on analog tape, that is the first time I think ever anybody has done that. So I was actually 10 years ahead of time there.
That's funny. What was the most difficult track to record on Injustice?
I can't remember. None of them were like more difficult than the others. It was just, it just took time. It was a hard working process. It took us about 5 months to record that album. And I mean, they kind of outbeat themselves on the Black Album. That took 1.5 years. But for the budget and for that time, that was the longest review spent on an album ever.
What did you think of the Black Album?
I thought it sounded great. I thought it was super cool. I loved it. I still do. I think it's a really, really good album.
Did you get any sneak peek or hear any demos before it was released?
Lars came by with the finished master tape. He was in Copenhagen. He came by and played it for me in the studio. He's actually I've actually just written a book. It's in Danish, sorry. But Lars has written the foreword, and he actually speaks about that, and it's pretty funny. I won't tell about that. People are gonna have to buy the book. It's in Danish. Sorry, you're gonna have to learn it. I have the foreword in English. I might post that on my website. We'll see, or we'll get the book translated. But I mean, he was himself scared how I would react to the Black Album, but was really happy that I liked it. But he came and played it, beforehand, and it was on a little DAT tape, which is a digital tape that is like very, very small. You can have it in your pocket, smaller than an iPhone. And he said, well, yeah, so this is $2 million right here. I think that's what it cost, the album. I thought it sounded really, really, really good. I really liked it.
So the Black Album, of course, marked a development in Metallica's sound. In terms of development, you got to see James, Lars, and Kirk over the course of 3 records, but only one with Jason. Being the new guy and filling in for Cliff Burton, was Jason nervous at all during the making of Injustice?
No, because, I mean, he hung out when we did some of the other stuff. A lot of the times it was just me and Lars in the studio, or me and James in the studio, and Lars and me and Kirk in the studio. But they all came and hung out to see how the progress was going. And so, no, I didn't sense any nervousness at all. I mean, I don't think he had anything to be nervous about. He's a great bass player, and as I said, I've heard the bass tracks, so I know they're great. So
yeah, I would love to hear them one day.
Oh yeah, me too. But the tapes are safely in HQ in San Francisco. So yeah, band has them. I think they're going to keep those under lock and key.
Yeah. There's actually a lot of cool family remixes on YouTube which have the boosted bass.
People send me those on and off. I'm not really bothered listening to those. I like the original stuff. That's it. That's the way it turned out. That's the way it's supposed to be. People can have their opinions. That's fine, but don't waste my time by fucking around with them.
One of the things that record is known for is that lyrically, And Justice is often regarded as the darkest Metallica record. Did it strike you as that when you first heard the songs?
I mean, the whole genre is pretty dark, so I was, it was kind of what I expected. It's only in hindsight that I maybe can see that it was probably a bit darker than some of the other ones.
Another interesting thing And Justice is noted for is Kirk Hammett's guitar work. You mentioned a little earlier how highly you think of his end solo on One. In general, how is Kirk in the studio? Is he easy to work with?
Yes and no. What happens is that he gets the songs and he starts composing solos. And then once we're done with the rhythm guitars and the bass tracks, we stick his solos on, alternate between vocals and solos. And sometimes he would have an idea and he would play a solo, and it was always me and Lars sitting kind of coaching him on that. And he would sometimes come with stuff we didn't really like, and some of the solos are actually composed by Kirk, Lars, and me, and in cooperation, because we changed it. Lars is really, really good at that. Lars could be a great record producer one day if he wanted to, because he's got a good vision of what you need sound-wise and progression-wise, and all his references are old metal albums. So yeah, some of the solos they were kept right off the bat, and some of the solos we had to work hard with, and we changed a lot in those. But it was still just work. We want this to be the best thing ever, so we have to put in the effort.
That's awesome. And Kirk, he's of course famous for various reasons, one of them being his use of the wah pedal. From your experience, does he approach the wah pedal in a unique way?
I think he's one of the few people in the world where it kind of becomes a part of his body. I think he uses it pretty well. I'm a big fan. That's one of the other things we wanted to do was change the sound during the solos, which not a lot of people did. They play a solo and it would be the same sound from start to beginning. We did a lot of experimenting by doing changing sounds and even putting harmonies on some parts and then coming back to the original, so stuff like that. And that's one of the reasons why everything is so well documented in terms of sounds, because sometimes you had to come back to the sound you started with at the end of the solo, and everything would be changed around like 15 times during the solo. So yeah, his wah work is fantastic. I love when he starts doing that.
Yeah, for sure. One of the things I find really interesting about Metallica's history is that even when they were on their independent label Megaforce, they were still selling tens of thousands of records, which is an amazing accomplishment, especially considering they were a new band at the time. Would you happen to have any insight into how Metallica handled the business end of things at that time?
No, they've always had the business end in the States, and I'm in Europe, so I don't know. But from the time they get Q Prime as management, they pretty much take care of all that. But I think Lars is a good entrepreneur, so I think he probably took care of most of that. That's my guess. It's because the drive and energy Lars has, that he's been booking concerts left and right to make sure they come out and play, which is the best way to present your music. So I don't know that anything about the business side, but I would guess that a lot of that has to do with Lars being the driving force he actually is.
A lot of people say that Lars is the businessman of the band, so to speak. Would you agree with that? Is that fair to say?
I think so, yeah.
Interesting. In terms of Cliff, I've heard him being compared to a mixture of the Misfits, Zeppelin, and Beethoven.
Actually, a pretty good comparison, because he had that good Zeppelin drive and Misfits, and then he had that classical approach. So yeah, that's a pretty good description. He was a crazy bass player, actually, because he didn't like headphones, so actually, for the bases, the 2 albums I did with him, I actually hooked up a pair of speakers and stuck his bass amp in another room, and he could like run around and play his bass to the sound on the speakers, so he didn't have to hear headphones. So it's just like playing live, and that's the way we got the best performances. And he did some pretty crazy stuff. So I normally tell people that some of the solos they think are guitar solos, that's Cliff on his bass, because he had all these pedals he fiddled about. He was innovative in a way that no other bass players was at that time.
Between Ride the Lightning and Master of Puppets, did Cliff grow as a musician, or was he essentially the same player?
No, I thought he'd gotten a lot better. I mean, they went basically on tour for most of the time, and that really sharpens your chops as a musician. So they were all of them were way better when we did Master of Puppets. But I mean, so was I, because I knew what the band was all about.
Interesting. Do you remember recording the Cliff Burton tribute on Injustice, To Live Is To Die?
To Live and To Die, exactly, yeah. To Live and To Die, yeah. That was pretty emotional, because he wrote most of that. And we did a lot of stuff, We remembered Cliff doing that.
That's awesome. And so, Flemming, how did you personally get into music?
I've always liked music. I started fiddling with tape recorders when I was 12. And then we have like a program where when you're in the 9th grade, you go out, test a work situation. Like if you want to be a dentist, you go out and you look at what a dentist does for a week and, stuff like that. I ended up in a recording studio because I liked music. The guy that owned the studio asked me whether I wanted to start a new studio with him, because he could see that this was something I knew something about. And that's how I got into it.